Picture this. You're alone on a rooftop in Afghanistan. The sun is setting. You can hear them coming, not 10, not 50, but 200 Taliban fighters. And they're all coming for you. Your radio's dead. Your team thinks you're already gone. You've got limited ammo, and the nearest help is miles away. Most men would surrender. Most men would run. But Dakota Meyer wasn't most men. What happened next on that rooftop would become one of the most incredible displays of courage in modern military history. This is the true story of how one Marine held off an entire Taliban army for 6 straight hours and lived to tell about it. Before we dive into this absolutely insane story, I need you to do me a favor. If you love hearing about real American heroes who did the impossible, hit that like button right now. And if you are not already subscribed to Silent Warriors, what are you waiting for? We bring you the most intense, jaw-dropping military stories that Hollywood couldn't even dream up because they actually happened. Now, let's get into it. September 8th, 2009, the Ganjgal Valley in eastern Afghanistan. If you've never heard of it, good, because it was one of the deadliest places on earth that day. The valley sits near the Pakistan border, a maze of rocky terrain, mud brick compounds, and narrow mountain passes. It's the kind of place where danger hides behind every corner, and the Taliban knew every inch of it. Dakota Meyer was 21 years old. 21. Most guys that age are figuring out college or their first real job. Dakota was a corporal in the United States Marine Corps, serving with Embedded Training Team 2-8. His job? Train Afghan soldiers and fight alongside them against the Taliban. Sounds straightforward, right? It wasn't. Not even close. The mission that morning seemed routine, or at least as routine as anything gets in a war zone. Meyer's team was supposed to move into the village of Ganjgal for a meeting with local elders. These meetings were crucial. Win the trust of the locals, and you could get valuable intelligence about Taliban movements. Lose their trust, and you were fighting blind. The team consisted of American Marines, Army trainers, and Afghan soldiers, about 30 men total. They'd be going into a village nestled deep in the valley, surrounded by high ridges on 3 sides. If you know anything about military tactics, alarm bells should be going off in your head right now. High ground surrounding your position, that's textbook ambush territory. And Meyer knew it before they even left. He felt it in his gut, that feeling every combat veteran talks about, when something just doesn't sit right. He wasn't alone in his concerns. Several members of the team expressed doubts about the mission. The intelligence seemed thin, the route was dangerous, and they'd be walking right into terrain that favored the enemy. But orders are orders. The mission was greenlit, and at dawn, the main element moved into the valley while Meyer and Staff Sergeant Juan Rodriguez Chavez stayed back with their gun trucks, providing overwatch from a position about a mile away. Meyer was behind the wheel of a Humvee mounted with a .50 caliber machine gun, a beast of a weapon that could tear through walls. Rodriguez Chavez manned a similar vehicle. Their job was to provide covering fire if things went sideways. Things went sideways fast. At approximately 5:30 am, just as the morning light started creeping over the mountains, all hell broke loose. The Taliban had been waiting. They'd positioned fighters on the high ridges, overlooking the village. More than 200 of them, armed with AK-47s, PKM machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and mortars. It was a massive force, and they'd planned this ambush perfectly. The first shots echoed through the valley like thunder. The American and Afghan forces walking into Ganjgal were caught in the open, exposed on 3 sides. Within seconds, the ambush turned into a bloodbath. Bullets rained down from every direction. RPGs exploded against the ground, sending shrapnel and rocks flying. Men were hit immediately. Meyer heard the gunfire from his position. Then his radio crackled to live, frantic voices, screaming for help. The team was pinned down. They were taking casualties. They needed immediate support. Meyer didn't hesitate. He grabbed his radio and tried to coordinate with the high-ups, calling for artillery support, for airstrikes, for anything that could suppress the enemy fire and give his brothers a chance to get out. But here's where the story takes a darker turn, a turn that still makes Meyer angry to this day. His requests were denied multiple times. The command structure higher up the chain wasn't authorizing the support. Maybe they thought the risk was too high. Maybe they didn't fully understand the situation. Whatever the reason, Meyer's team was on its own, and men were dying. Now, put yourself in Meyer's boots for a second. You're a 21-year-old Marine. You've been ordered to stay in position. Your requests for support are being denied by people who outrank you. People who are supposed to know better. The smart play, the safe play, is to hold your position and wait for orders. But Meyer could hear his friends dying over the radio. He could hear Lieutenant Michael Johnson's voice. calling for help. He could hear the Afghan soldiers screaming, and he made a choice that would define the rest of his life. He turned to Rodriguez Chavez and said something along the lines of, "Screw this, we're going in." Let me repeat that. Against direct orders, with no air support, no artillery backup, and facing an enemy force that outnumbered them 10 to 1, Meyer and Rodriguez Chavez made the decision to drive their gun trucks straight into the kill zone. This wasn't bravery. This was something beyond bravery. This was the kind of decision that gets you either killed or court-martialed or both. But Meyer didn't care. His brothers needed him, and that was all that mattered. They mounted up, fired up the Humvees, and drove straight into hell. Imagine driving a vehicle into a valley where 200 enemy fighters are dug into the high ground, all of them shooting at anything that moves. The sound alone would be overwhelming. The crack of AK-47s, the boom of RPGs, the whistle of bullets zipping past your head at supersonic speeds. Meyer was behind the wheel, one hand on the steering wheel, one hand on the 50 cal. Rodriguez Chavez was doing the same in the other truck. They drove in formation, weapons blazing, laying down suppressive fire on the Taliban positions. The Taliban weren't expecting this. They'd planned the perfect ambush: catch the Americans in the village, cut them down from the high ground, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. What they didn't plan for was two maniacs in gun trucks charging straight at them, firing everything they had. Meyer's 50 cal roared to life, sending massive rounds into the enemy positions. Each shot sounded like a thunderclap. Taliban fighters scattered, but there were so many of them that even with the suppressive fire, the bullets kept coming. Rounds pinged off the armored Humvees. RPGs exploded nearby, close enough that Meyer could feel the concussive blast in his chest. They reached the first group of pinned down soldiers, Afghan troops who'd been caught in the initial ambush. Some were wounded, blood soaking through their uniforms. Others were already dead. Meyer and Rodriguez Chavez loaded as many as they could into the trucks, all while continuing to fire at the Taliban. Then they did something absolutely insane. They turned around and drove back through the kill zone to get the wounded to safety. That first trip through the valley was just the beginning. Meyer got the wounded back to a safe position, handed them off to medical personnel, and then get this, he went back. Not once, not twice. Meyer and Rodriguez Chavez made 5 trips into that valley, each time driving through a hailstorm of bullets and explosives, each time pulling out more wounded soldiers. On one of those trips, Meyer jumped out of his Humvee while under fire, and this is important, while under direct enemy fire to pull wounded Afghan soldiers onto the truck. Bullets were hitting the ground around him. You could see the dirt kicking up where rounds were impacting, and Meyer just kept moving, kept lifting wounded men, kept getting them to safety. But here's what makes this story even more intense: the radio chatter. Meyer could still hear his friends in the village. Lieutenant Michael Johnson, Staff Sergeant Aaron Kennefick, Corporal Dakota Meyer's friend and hospital corpsman James Layton, and Staff Sergeant Michael Huff. They were still alive, still fighting, still calling for help, and Meyer couldn't reach them. The village was too deep in the valley, too heavily defended. The Taliban had concentrated their fire there, turning it into a death trap. Meyer tried multiple times to push through, but the enemy fire was too intense. Even his armored Humvee couldn't take much more punishment. The reality was sinking in. His friends were going to die, and there was nothing he could do about it. This is the part of the story that breaks your heart. Meyer could hear Johnson's voice over the radio, getting weaker. The lieutenant was wounded but still fighting, still trying to coordinate his men, still refusing to give up. Meyer was screaming into the radio, telling them to hold on, that he was coming for them, but he couldn't get through. Every time he tried to advance, the Taliban fire intensified. RPGs were exploding all around his truck. The 50 cal was overheating from constant firing. The Humvee was taking damage, and more wounded soldiers kept appearing. Men who needed immediate evacuation, or they'd bleed out right there in the valley. Meyer had to make an impossible choice. Keep trying to reach his friends in the village and risk everyone dying, or focus on saving the men he could reach. It's the kind of choice no one should ever have to make, especially not a 21-year-old kid from Kentucky. He kept going back for the wounded, trip after trip after trip, and all the while, he could hear his friends dying over the radio. Johnson, Kennefick, Layton, Huff, one by one. Their voices went silent. By the time Meyer made his 5th and final trip into the valley, it had been 6 hours since the ambush started. 6 hours of non-stop combat. 6 hours of dodging bullets and explosions. 6 hours of pulling wounded men from the jaws of death. Meyer was physically and emotionally exhausted. His arms ached from manning the 50 cal. His throat was raw from screaming orders and calling for his friends on the radio. But the mission wasn't over. As the sun climbed higher and air support finally arrived too late. Far too late, the Taliban began to retreat. The overwhelming firepower from attack, helicopters and jets finally broke the ambush. The enemy melted back into the mountains, leaving behind their dead and the devastation they'd caused. Meyer's final mission that day was the hardest. He had to go back into the village, the place where his friends had made their last stand, and recover their bodies. This wasn't about tactics anymore. This wasn't about winning. This was about making sure no American was left behind. The village was eerily quiet after 6 hours of chaos. The buildings were riddled with bullet holes. Spent shell casings covered the ground like snow. And there, in a small compound, Meyer found them. Lieutenant Johnson, Staff Sergeant Kennefic, DOC Layton, Staff Sergeant Half, for American heroes who'd fought to the very end. Meyer and the other survivors loaded their fallen brothers onto the vehicles. According to those who were there, Meyer was crying, openly crying, as he carried his friends' bodies. And who could blame him? These weren't just fellow Marines. These were his brothers. He tried everything to save them, pushed himself beyond any reasonable limit, and it still hadn't been enough. He'd also recovered several fallen Afghan soldiers, refusing to leave any ally behind. By the end of that day, Meyer had helped rescue over a dozen wounded fighters and recovered the bodies of 4 American heroes and multiple Afghan soldiers. The Battle of Ganjgal became one of the deadliest ambushes of the Afghan war. For Americans killed, it wounded numerous Afghan casualties, and a lot of hard questions about why the support had been denied, why the mission had been approved in the first place, and why it took so long for help to arrive. For Meyer, the battle didn't end when he left the valley. He was physically intact miraculously. He hadn't been seriously wounded despite driving through that kill zone 5 times. But mentally, emotionally, he was torn apart. Survivors' guilt hit him hard. He'd saved over a dozen lives. But the 4 he couldn't save haunted him. He struggled with the memories, with the what ifs, with the sound of his friends' voices calling for help over the radio. Like so many combat veterans, Meyer found himself fighting a new battle at home, a battle against PTSD, against depression, against the weight of what he'd experienced. But here's where Meyer's story takes another turn, one that shows his character just as clearly as his actions in combat. He could have retreated from the world. He could have let the trauma define him. Instead, he chose to fight not with weapons this time, but by speaking out. Meyer became an advocate for veterans, speaking openly about his struggles with PTSD and the challenges of transitioning back to civilian life. He wrote a book, Into the Fire, detailing not just the battle but his journey afterward. He started using his platform to help other veterans, to break down the stigma around mental health, to make sure other warriors knew they weren't alone. In 2011, 2 years after the Battle of Ganjgal, Dakota Meyer received a call that would change his life again. President Barack Obama was awarding him the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration, given only for conspicuous gallantry at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. Meyer was only the 3rd living recipient of the Medal of Honor from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Think about that. Out of hundreds of thousands of service members who deployed to those conflicts, who faced danger every single day, Meyer's actions stood out as truly extraordinary. The ceremony at the White House was emotional. The citation read out Meyer's actions in detail: the 5 trips into the kill zone, the dozen or more lives saved, the recovery of fallen Americans under fire. President Obama placed the light blue ribbon around Meyer's neck, the medal hanging heavy with the weight of sacrifice and heroism. But here's what Meyer said that day, something that shows you the kind of man he is. He made it clear that he was accepting the medal on behalf of everyone who'd fought in that valley. He accepted it for Johnson, Kennefic, Layton, and half the men who didn't come home. He accepted it for Rodriguez Chavez, who'd been right there with him through every dangerous run. He accepted it for the Afghan soldiers who'd fought and died alongside Americans. In Meyer's mind, he wasn't a hero. He was just a Marine who did what Marines do, refused to leave his brothers behind, no matter the cost. The Battle of Ganjgal raised some serious questions that still echo today. Why was the mission approved despite concerns from personnel on the ground? Why was the support denied when the ambush happened? Why did it take hours for air support to arrive when men were dying? An investigation later found that there were failures in the command structure that day. Some officers faced administrative punishments. Changes were made to how missions were planned and how support was authorized. But for the families of those who died, no investigation could bring their loved ones back. Meyer himself has been critical of the decisions made that day. In interviews and in his book, he's pulled no punches about what he sees as failures that cost American lives. It's a reminder that, even in our military, one of the most professional fighting forces in the world, mistakes happen, and those mistakes have real, tragic consequences. But here's what can't be questioned: the courage of the men who fought in that valley. The Marines, the army trainers, the Afghan soldiers, they all faced an overwhelming enemy force and refused to quit. Some paid the ultimate price. Others, like Meyer, carried the physical and emotional scars for the rest of their lives. So where is Dakota Meyer now? After leaving active duty, he's continued to serve in his own way. He's worked in construction, started businesses, and remained active in veteran advocacy. He married and started a family, finding some of the peace that eluded him for years after the battle. He's also remained in the public eye, not because he seeks attention, but because he understands that his story can help others. When he talks about PTSD, when he discusses the challenges veterans face, people listen. His Medal of Honor gives him a platform, and he's chosen to use it to help his fellow warriors. Meyer is quick to point out that he's not perfect. He's made mistakes in his personal life, faced his own demons, struggled with relationships and with finding his place in civilian society. But he's honest about it all, and that honesty resonates with veterans who are going through similar struggles. He's also spoken about the importance of remembering those who didn't come home. For Meyer, Johnson, Kennefic, Layton, and Huff aren't just names on a memorial, they're his brothers, forever 20-something years old, frozen in time at the moment of their greatest sacrifice. What can we learn from Dakota Meyer's story? What does it teach us about courage, about sacrifice, about brotherhood? First, it teaches us that heroes aren't born there, ordinary people who make extraordinary choices when the moment demands it. Meyer wasn't a superhero. He was a 21-year-old kid from rural Kentucky who happened to be in the worst place at the worst time, and he chose to act. Second, it shows us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite fear. Meyer was terrified during those runs into the kill zone. He knew the odds. He knew he might not make it back, but he went anyway because his brothers needed him. Third, it reminds us that leadership matters. Meyer saw a situation where his leaders had failed him and his team, and he made the decision to lead from the front. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't pass the buck. He took responsibility and action. Fourth, it highlights the reality of all the chaos, the confusion, the split-second decisions that determine who lives and who dies. War isn't like the movies. It's messy and tragic and complicated, and sometimes even when you do everything right, people still die. And finally, it shows us that the battle doesn't end when the shooting stops. For Meyer and thousands of veterans like him, the fight continues at home against invisible wounds, against a civilian world that doesn't always understand, against the memories that won't fade. You know what's amazing about Meyer's story? He wasn't the only hero that day. Rodriguez Chavez was right there with him, making those same dangerous runs. The Afghan soldiers who kept fighting despite catastrophic casualties, the Marines and Army trainers who held their positions under withering fire, the pilots who finally arrived and helped break the ambush. This is what military brotherhood really means. It's not a slogan. It's not propaganda. It's a bond forged in the worst conditions imaginable, where you absolutely know that the person next to you would die for you, and you do the same for them. That brotherhood is why Meyer couldn't stay back when he heard his friends calling for help. It's why he made 5 trips into a kill zone when one would have been suicidal. It's why he continues to speak about the battle, keeping the memory of those who fell alive in the hearts and minds of Americans. In his Medal of Honor citation, there's a phrase that captures it perfectly. Corporal Meyer's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service. But for Meyer, it was simpler than that. It was just what you do. You don't leave your brothers behind. Let's take a moment to honor the 4 Americans who didn't come home from Ganjgal. First Lieutenant Michael E. Johnson, 25, from Virginia Beach, Virginia, a combat advisor with ETT2-8. Johnson was described by those who knew him as an exceptional officer who led from the front. He was engaged to be married. Staff Sergeant Erin Militars Kennefic, 30, from Roswell, Georgia, another combat advisor. Kennefic was a seasoned warrior who deployed multiple times. He left behind a wife and family who loved him deeply. Hospital Corpsman 3rd Class James I. Layton, 22, from Riverbank, California. DOC Layton was the team's medic, the guy who was supposed to save lives. Instead, he died trying to help his wounded teammates. Navy corpsmen are some of the bravest warriors in the military. They run toward danger when everyone else is taking cover. Staff Sergeant Michael H. Huff, 26, from Morgantown, Pennsylvania. Like the others, Huff was a combat advisor who believed in the mission and in helping Afghan forces defend their country. He died doing what he loved, serving his nation. These men weren't just casualties. They were sons, brothers, fiancés, husbands, friends. They had dreams and plans and people waiting for them back home. The Battle of Ganjgal took all of that away, leaving behind families who still feel the pain of their loss. When we talk about Dakota Meyer's heroism, we have to remember that his heroism was in service of these men and others like them. He couldn't save them all, but he never stopped trying, and he's never stopped honoring their memory. The Battle of Ganjgal happened during a critical period in the Afghan War. 2009 was the deadliest year for coalition forces up to that point, with Taliban attacks intensifying across the country. The Ganjgal Valley was part of a broader campaign to win hearts and minds in remote areas, to train Afghan forces to defend themselves, and to push back against Taliban influence. It was a mission fraught with challenges. The terrain favored the enemy. The Taliban had local knowledge and could blend into the civilian population, and the rules of engagement designed to minimize civilian casualties sometimes put American forces at a tactical disadvantage. Ganjgal became a symbol of those challenges. It showed how quickly a routine mission could turn deadly. It exposed weaknesses in the command structure and the approval process for support, and it demonstrated the incredible courage of the men and women fighting on the front lines, often in circumstances that would break lesser individuals. The battle also sparked a conversation about risk assessment and mission planning. Should the meeting in Ganjgal have been approved given the terrain and intelligence? Were enough precautions taken? Could the ambush have been prevented or at least anticipated? These are difficult questions without easy answers. War is unpredictable. Perfect intelligence doesn't exist, and sometimes, despite everyone's best efforts, things go catastrophically wrong. One of the most powerful aspects of Dakota Meyer's post-military life has been his advocacy for veterans struggling with PTSD and transition issues. He's been remarkably open about his own struggles, refusing to pretend that everything's fine just because he's a Medal of Honor recipient. In speeches and interviews, Meyer talks about the nightmares, the flashbacks, the anger, and the sense of disconnection from civilian life. He talks about how he'd hear a loud noise and instantly be back in that valley, heart racing, ready for combat. He talks about the guilt survivor's guilt. Guilt over the men he couldn't save. Guilt over actions taken and not taken. But he also talks about healing, about finding purpose, about the importance of reaching out for help. He's encouraged veterans to seek therapy, to talk to someone, to not suffer in silence. His message is simple but powerful. You are not alone. You are not weak for struggling, and there is hope on the other side. This message resonates because it comes from someone who's been there. Meyer isn't a politician or a doctor preaching from a safe distance. He's a warrior who's walked through the fire and come out the other side, scarred but standing. For a generation of post-9/11 veterans, Meyer has become a symbol of both the best of military service and the challenges that come after. He represents the courage we admire and the struggles we need to acknowledge. Here's something that always strikes me about Meyer's story. One person really can make a difference. One person making one decision can save lives, can change outcomes, can be the difference between disaster and survival. Meyer could have followed orders. He could have stayed back, waited for official approval, done everything by the book. And if he had, over a dozen wounded soldiers would have died in that valley. They'd have bled out, waiting for help that was too slow in coming. But Meyer didn't do that. He saw what needed to be done, and he did it. He broke the rules because following them would have meant watching his brothers die. And in that moment, that decision, he embodied everything that's good about the American military, the initiative, the courage, the absolute refusal to abandon your fellow warriors. It's a reminder that we all face moments in our lives where we have to choose. Do we play it safe, or do we step up? Do we wait for someone else to act, or do we take responsibility ourselves? Do we do what's easy, or what's right? Most of us will never face a choice as dramatic as Meyer's. We won't have to drive into a kill zone or face down hundreds of enemy fighters. But we all face our own versions of that choice, moments where courage is required, where doing the right thing comes at a cost, where we have to decide what kind of person we're going to be. Meyer chose courage. He chose brotherhood. He chose action. And because of that choice, people lived who otherwise would have died. So why does Dakota Meyer's story matter? Why should you care about what happened in a remote valley in Afghanistan over 15 years ago? First, because it's a reminder of what our service members do for us, while most of us were going about our daily lives working, studying, spending time with family, young men and women like Meyer were in the worst places on earth, putting their lives on the line. They deserve our recognition, our respect, and our support. Second, because it's a story about the best of humanity. In a world that often seems dark and divided, stories like Meyer's shine a light. They show us that courage exists, that selflessness is real, that people will sacrifice for something greater than themselves. Third, because it honors those who didn't come home. Johnson, Tenefik, Layton, have they not just names on a wall? They were real people who lived real lives and made real sacrifices. Telling their story keeps their memory alive and reminds us of the cost of freedom. Fourth, because it highlights issues we need to address: PTSD, veteran suicide, the challenges of transitioning from military to civilian life. Meyer's openness about these struggles helps break down stigma and encourages others to seek help. And finally, because it's inspiring. In a world where we're often told to be cynical, to look out for ourselves, to not take risks, Meyer's story says something different. It says that heroism is real, that one person can make a difference, that doing the right thing even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous matters. Dakota Meyer didn't set out to be a hero that day in September 2009. He was just a 21-year-old Marine doing his job. But when the moment came, when his brothers needed him, he made a choice that defined him and saved lives. 5 trips into a kill zone, 6 hours of combat, over a dozen lives saved, 4 heroes honored, 1 Medal of Honor earned, but, in Meyer's mind, belonging to everyone who fought that day. The Battle of Ganjgal reminds us of the reality of war, the chaos, the tragedy, the courage, and the cost. It shows us what military brotherhood really means, and it gives us a model of what true heroism looks like. Ordinary people making extraordinary choices when it matters most. Dakota Meyer is still fighting his battles today, working to help veterans, speaking out about mental health, honoring those who didn't come home. He carries the weight of that day with him, as all combat veterans do. But he's chosen to use that experience to help others, to shine a light on issues that matter, to keep the memory of his fallen brothers alive. That's the real heroism, not just what you do in the moment, but how you live with it afterward, how you honor those who fell, how you help those who are still fighting their own battles. If Dakota Meyer's story moved you, if it inspired you, if it reminded you of the sacrifice our service members make every single day, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. Smash it. This is the kind of story that needs to be shared, that needs to be heard, that needs to be remembered. And if you are not already subscribed to Silent Warriors, what are you waiting for? We bring you the most incredible true stories of courage, sacrifice, and heroism from America's military. Stories that need to be told. Warriors who deserve to be honored, and lessons that we all need to hear. Click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Drop a comment below and let me know. What do you think about Dakota Meyer's actions? Would you have made the same choice? And are there other military heroes whose stories you want to hear? Let's keep the conversation going and keep these warriors' memories alive. Until next time, remember, freedom isn't free. It's paid for by heroes like Dakota Meyer and the brothers he fought beside. Never forget their sacrifice. Never forget their courage. And never forget that we owe them a debt we can never fully repay. This is Silent Warriors. Stay strong, stay inspired, and we'll see you in the next one.